What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, continuing my deep dive into the Grateful Dead's 1978 official release live concerts. Today, I'm going to be discussing what should have been maybe the greatest shows the Dead ever played, but for some reason or another, kind of just didn't turn out that way. This is Rocking the Cradle, Egypt 1978. In September of 78, the band played 3 shows in front of the pyramids of Giza, or at least at the pyramid complex there. They built a stage. I think they were using the Who's equipment because it was too expensive to ship their own. It was kind of engineered or motivated or inspired by Phil, who was interested in playing in places that had power, natural power, supernatural power, mystical power, whatever. And you cannot deny the Egyptian periods. There's mystery around that. And it almost feels in listening to this. So what this is, this release is a 2 CD release of material comprised of the shows on the 15th and the 16th. There was 14th, 15th, 16th. This is primarily stuff from the 16th, couple 15th tracks thrown in. Almost the entirety of the second set on the 16th. Though I'm assuming in order to make things fit on CDs, they moved some of the second set stuff to the first disc. It's a little bit out of order. The shows were all pretty short, surprisingly short. And listening to these releases, it's got what is in some ways a 78 problem, but also seems to be doubled down because they had to travel to Egypt. But a lot of the 78 shows I think tend to be very uneven, and you have these absolute moments of just inspiration, maybe a song or two or a sequence in the second set, but it's preceded by a first set where you're just they can do it. They know how to play it. They can go through the motions and make people happy, but there's a lack of something. Something's just like a spark or a fire or an inspiration. This almost seems one, they're exhausted. The tempo in quite a number of these songs is slow. A couple of the songs are new to being played live. There's a handful of songs that are seen. I think SHAKEDOWN's its second performance. I think something else, Miracle, is its 4th performance. Stagger Lee is its 3rd performance, I think. You have a couple of new songs, but the Miracle sounds great and the SHAKEDOWN sounds great, so that doesn't explain whatever's going on with Stagger Lee. But there does seem to be this almost... I don't want to say they were intimidated by the pyramids, but there does seem to be the moment. I don't know if it was too big for them, but they didn't want to disrespect anything. I don't know. They're weird shows. They have moments. They have incredible moments, but they also kind of drag at times. And so ranking this, I was kind of torn and went back and forth for a while. I'm going to rank these among the other 78 releases I've talked about so far on the channel, done all the Dave's picks, the Dick's picks, a number of other ones. I'm going to continue down this rabbit hole for a while. But it's an interesting release. It's a fascinating release. It's not something I think I would, if somebody was getting into the Dead, I don't think I would give them this early on in that. I would make sure they were firmly planted in that camp, or yeah, I'm a Deadhead, give it all to me. Then I would think I would give them this. I think maybe the things that I like about it might stand out a little more, and they'd be able to appreciate more because they're somewhat different than the norm, right? And so as a Deadhead who's listened to way too much Dead in my life, the things that stand out for me on here are things that would eventually not be the norm for these songs, so I think that's why I like them. And then things that are part of the regular rotation are just yeah, this is kind of rough. Some of this is kind of rough. So it's 2 discs. There was a bonus disc. I have it. Could not find it. So I have no comments on the bonus disc. I do remember it's got an estimated eyes on it. I think there's a terrapin. I think they're all pretty anemic, and they just kind of, they're doing what they're supposed to do. They run through it pretty quickly. I think I remember the estimated was kind of creepy. But other than that, I can't remember it being a standout disc. But these two you can still get now. I think the bonus disc was only available if you got this like right away. So disc 1 is primarily stuff that was played in the first sets of the 15th and the 16th, with 2 songs pulled from the second set and inserted here. And it doesn't really hurt the flow of this. It actually helps this disc because those are the highlights. But it would have been neat had they been contained in the second set, if there had been that continuity of that flow of continuity, or continuity of flow, or whatever. Opens up with a jack straw, which Phil sounds amazing. I'm going to give props to whoever's mixing this. Phil's bass sounds amazing. He always plays great. Now he sounds great. Like, he's got punch in this. Like, Phil rescues many of these songs. But despite Phil sounding great, the jack straw is kind of sluggish. Seems like it's lacking something. Jerry's solos are not really solos as much as he's playing these really just like chords the entire time. These really choppy, terse, almost like ZZ Top-esque chord runs. But they're kind of tasty and they're kind of good, but they're just odd. And the second solo, before we get to the jack straw from Wichita, Cut His Buddy Down, that is actually good. It kind of redeems the whole song. It's a really strong finish. And there's kind of hope, like, all right, whatever was hurting them in the first half of the song, they've gotten over it. But then these tracks were chosen. So then we get in this weird thing, like, we're going back and forth between the 15th and the 16th to some degree. We're not getting, the songs necessarily in the order they're played. So then we're getting into that issue. So the fact that they're already lacking energy, now we're just constantly interrupting the natural flow of a show, right? But what we get for the rest of this is we get a Road Jimmy, which needs to come later in the disc. You need to set up energy. Road Jimmy needs to be a breath of fresh air, like a calm down, slow down, take a trip down the river after a hectic day. It's not the way you want to start your day. I think Bob tries to take a slide guitar solo in this, or something happens at one point. I think it's Bob's slide guitar that is, and it's kind of painful. Jerry redeems with his solo. The ending is fun as always, but it's not a standout Road Jimmy for me as among his other 78 stuff. We get a New Minglewood Blues, which it just feels a little half step slow. It's like, I was born in the desert, instead of that, I was born in the desert. We're a little slower. Tasty playing. Phil sounds absolutely amazing. Phil is so good in the mix. Keith has some really good moments in this. Bob's still teaching himself how to play slide live on stage, so it can be rougher at times than it is others. I think these Egypt shows are rougher than not. But it's a Minglewood. Candyman kind of fits this tempo perfectly. Like, this is exactly the pocket they're in, but I kind of don't think it helps Candyman because it's just too easy, too relaxed. Though I really like to hear this song. I really like kind of the weird spaciness in Jerry's solo. Looks Like Rain is Looks Like Rain. We're starting to get that big Looks Like Rain vibe, that like second set piece type vibe that would run and ruin, that would kind of rule in the 80s and 90s. We're getting that bigger sense of a Looks Like Rain at this point. Then we just get a stagger Lee that kind of just staggers slowly. It's like 1948 Xmas Eve with a full moon. No, I mean, but it's not even that. It's more 1948 Xmas. I mean, it's slow. It's kind of hurts. It's the third one ever. So maybe that's the excuse. They haven't quite figured out the tempo. That isn't what. It feels like it's dragging. It feels like they're tired. It feels like the trip to Egypt wore them out. Stagger Lee's rough. But then we get an I Need a Miracle that is fantastic. Rock and roll energy. The closing solo is nice and long and tasty. This is something that should have stayed more in place. Just this solo should have got longer over the years and not shorter. But the I Need a Miracle is just refreshingly, despite the fact that it's an I Need a Miracle and those lyrics, it's great. It's fantastic. I believe this is the 4th ever, with the 3rd ever being the night before the 15th. This is from the 16th. It's fantastic. Great energy. Closing guitar solo is fantastic. That essentially kind of goes into an It's All Over Now. They try a segue. It's not the smoothest thing in the world, but without stopping, we eventually end up in It's All Over Now. It's really good. Nice funky solo break. Fun song. Great song choice. But that originally went in the middle of the second set after Iko, but before a shakedown. So I think it would have been even better there. But it kind of is the thing that saves the first disc. And then they close out with a Deal. Deal's starting to get that high energy. There isn't really a long hardcore jam at the end, as much as they spend like, I don't know, forever singing Don't You Let That Do, just like repeating that ending phrase over and over and over and over and over and over. And Donna's just like, screaming. It's fun. It's good. But it's kind of a rough first disc. And like really the only reason I think I would ever want to listen to it is the I Need a Miracle, It's All Over Now. But to be honest, I have a playlist in which I've inserted that back in the second set. So I just listen to the second set. So it's a disc I don't listen to. Second set's a little bit different. Still has some trouble, but it's a little bit better. Opens up with Aline Arajid. I think it's a soft G. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. This is written by an Egyptian composer called Hamza El-Din, and an early 20th century piece. It's pretty much, it feels like a late night drum circle. It's just got that really awesome, just ride this wave of percussion energy. And the band, Jerry, Phil, Bob, are just kind of weaving their way through this. I'm assuming, flirting with the melody of what the composition is. It is very tasty. It is very hypnotic. It is absolutely mesmerizing. And as I think it's a little even underwhelming listening to it, because it just seems like, I don't know, it should hit a little more, even though it is absolutely fantastic. But I can only imagine how magical this must have been to actually be there under the stars in Egypt, the pyramids right there with this. It's a pretty special 7 minutes of music. That goes into a Fire on the Mountain. They wrap this up and Phil's immediately like doot, 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 playing that Fire on the Mountain bass line. And it's really good energy. But like, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds in, it sounds like you could almost literally hear them slowing the song down so it can drag even more. Like you could almost hear them like pulling the drummers down, like, whoa, yeah, right here. It is odd. And the Fire has its moments. We don't really get too crazy. The solos, especially as we get towards like the first solo is kind of a throwaway. Once we get into the second solo, Jerry's kind of pushing the psych element a little bit. He's getting some nice runs in. Towards the end of the song, we never really wrap it up, and we go into this really kind of chill, unwinding ending vibe that's pretty awesome. But the whole thing it's pretty subdued and laid back. And I think the energy of the opening Ala Arajid just kind of imbues with this a sense of like, hey man, just play it cool, take it easy, don't push too hard, respect the environment. It's an interesting Fire on the Mountain, but I do think you're not going to put it on a greatest of 78. I don't think you would like turn anybody on to Fire on the Mountain with this Fire on the Mountain. That goes into an Iko, pretty straightforward Iko. Kind of subdued, kind of laid back. My memories of seeing Ikos are like the day used to do these like Mardi Gras shows in Oakland, and Iko was the song they would play when the Mardi Gras parade would happen. So like you would have like these huge like a parade going through like the Oakland Coliseum or the Kaiser Auditorium, like on the floor, and you're crowded up to people, and there's barrage of lights and confetti and noise and who knows else what's going on in your head, and the Dead's playing Iko on stage. So this is really subdued compared to that. Then we get a Shakedown Street. It's only the second ever Shakedown Street. It sounds amazing. The band are nailing it. We don't have that, well, backing vocals are not there. But when we go into that middle jam, that sort of middle solo, Jerry's exploring corners he normally doesn't explore as far as the melody goes. We kind of still have that same structure. It's kind of loose and jammed out, but you're going to wrap it up and go back into the song. And they wrap it up and they go back into the song after Jerry's doing some pretty neat things with that middle solo. Like, we're still not like quite figuring out what Shakedown is about. And then it's like Jerry doesn't know to go back into the song, which is maybe not what actually happens. And so we get another run through of that solo thing, only it takes a while to kind of rebuild the fire. But then when we get to the part where we should go back into the lyrics, Jerry just takes off. He starts running out in the middle of the outfield. And next thing you know, we're in like kind of upbeat estimated profit space exploration land. Like we are going out there. Like this is like estimated meets playing. Like we're not funk. There's a funk groove. Like you can tell the rhythm section's like, hey, wait a minute, man. We had different plans for this, or didn't we maybe talk about making this a little bit funkier? But Jerry's like, no, I like the psych stuff now. I'm gonna explore. I'm gonna go over there and go over there. You can follow me, you can not, whatever. We're gonna do this. It gets really weird at times. Bob's rhythm gets really weird at some point towards the end. Bob's just like, hey, I'm with you, Jerry. This get really funky and weird. Yeah, it's really, really cool. It's not like any shakedown. Like, you know, I think of shakedowns, I'm thinking like, yeah, we're going to get this like kind of funky sort of outro after the lyrics into a jam that's just going to be really funky, get some cool keyboard work. Like once we get to the Midland era, shakedown becomes a completely different beast. But this one feels like the pyramids won, like the energy won, the power won. Jerry was like, no, 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 no. This is the time. I'm going. I'm off. I'm following this. And it's pretty good. Like this is a playlist Shakedown Street. This is like, if you're gonna listen to a bunch of Shakedown Streets and rank them, I think this one goes up pretty close to the top because it's a great Shakedown Street. Kind of dissolves and goes into a drums. That goes into a pretty crazy space. The drums almost feels like the drums is sort of this ritualistic tribute to the pyramids. Like there's this sort of reverential attitude towards it. And space is the band trying to interpret the pyramid's response. And at first it can handle it. And then it's like, nope, can't do this. Yeah, nope, things are just getting crazy. We tried. But they're both really short. The whole thing's like less than 7 minutes, 8 minutes. Pretty good. We get a truckin', pretty solid truckin', but kind of more country than ever. The intro doesn't start with the whistle and the drums, but it's this almost like country riff. But I think it's Jerry. Maybe it's Bob doing it. Really a little more of a country flavor at first. But when we get to the ending jam, they nail that that tightening up jam in which they're all like playing that same riff and they tighten up, and then there's that huge ridiculous drop. They nail the ascent and they reach that peak and they all fall off that mountain at different times, and it's a train wreck and momentum is lost, and it's like, well, it was a nice try, we gave it a shot. But then Jerry's not giving up. Jerry's like, no, man, we had that ascent. We got to fix this mistake. We got to go back and, like Bob the Builder, we can do this. We can fix this. So they try it again. It's a little different of an ascent. I don't think it's as perfect as the first one, but you can tell they're trying to, they know that they can ascend. And when they hit that drop, everybody is hitting that down note like boom. I want to say the sound guy even upped the bass levels to double down on it. And they hit it a couple more times like, no, we can do this. We are good enough to make this work. And it's a great ending to an average, at times, disastrous trucking. And it's not one of those truckins that's going to turn anybody to make them be a deadhead. But if you're a deadhead and you haven't heard this, it is fun because that car wreck, it's pretty major. The fact that they I think if they're just in somewhere else, like they're in San Antonio, Texas on a Wednesday night, they're not going back up to clean up that mess. In front of the pyramids, they had to. We get a strangely haunting Stella Blue. Beautiful intro. Absolutely stunning intro. It almost feels like it's an exhausted performance of this. Like they're emotionally exhausted, they're physically, they're spiritually, but it ties really well into the song. It almost seems like they're struggling to even keep it together. Very last gasp aspect to the solo, but it all works well. It's a really good Stella Blue. And then a really tight, very well performed. The band is locked in around and around. Great energy. They bring it. They bring it at the end. And that ends the disc. A fascinating disc too. Fascinating. Like the Fire on the Mountain, it's great. It's a Fire on the Mountain. The Ico kind of average. The trucking, that train wreck is ridiculous. But the opening Ali and Adajid is a great chill listen, kind of inspired. And the Shakedown Street, I think it's a must hear just because of the direction it goes and just how out there. Like this Shakedown is out there. Like most Shakedown Streets would be a musical interpretation of what is happening on Shakedown Street, right? Like Shakedown Street, let's say you're in the dead parking lot, there's rows of cars, they're all selling stuff. Some of it's legal, some of it's illegal. All of it's illegal technically because nobody has a license. But you know, some of it's stuff you wouldn't get arrested for if you were selling in a store. Some of it is. And I think most of the live jams on Shakedown Street are like musical interpretations of that, funky and weird, and maybe sometimes we get out there. This Shakedown Street is what happens to that guy who takes a step on Shakedown Street, buys something from the first person he sees, and then he wanders off into the depths of the parking lot, not to show up again for like another 2 hours. And I've met many people who have done that. So I wrote a book about that once. So that's what this Shakedown Street is. It's the real version of Shakedown Street, not the sort of I know the word, like when you turn something into a myth, mythological, not mythicized. I don't know. All right, I'm really going off on this show. Where would I rank this among all the others that I did? I probably should have brought that list up before. I put it right in the middle. And it's really, I think more than anything, that Shakedown Street and that opening, Ali and Adajid, are what propel this to these heights. And plus, the whole second set, it's actually pretty fun. But it's right in the middle at 5. I think everything above it has more really go-to drawn moments that raise it up or are just more consistent from start to finish. But yeah, I have it in number 5. It's an intriguing listen. First disc, second disc is pretty. I'm going to go listen to that Shakedown now. I'm really excited to hear that again. But yeah, that's what I got. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the show, on the dead, on all those kind of things. I rambled a lot tonight, but this show, I don't know. It's an interest. The dead are interesting, fascinating, man. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.